Back in the studio, we didn't flood. Regular viewers will remember Dan and Barry. Dan was an F-111 pilot at Upper Heyford during the Cold War in his 20s, where he saw a triangular craft which stayed with him all his life. Dan also became a senior US Air Force test pilot, flying tons of aircraft, everything from the Goodyear blimp to the U-2 spy plane, and was involved with advanced propulsion devices that he test flew. He then transitioned using his degrees in physics to become the US Air Force leading directed energy weapon specialist, teaching both the concept and no doubt the operational use of DEW to US Air Force pilots. This is advanced lasers and high-powered microwaves and other exotic DEW systems. Dan is prepared to share what he can talk about. For example, a Romulan cloaking device.
There's clearly ongoing efforts to create what we would think of as like a Star Trek Romulan cloaking device that would make a craft seem to disappear. It doesn't really disappear, of course, but it's about um, moving the light rays and bringing what's behind it around and recreating it in front or above it or
Sure,
whatever angle.
three-dimensionally, yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, but yeah, the details of that are clearly highly classified. And so there's active work going on.
I know.
What we've achieved or haven't achieved, I don't know.
Right.
Uh, I was cleared into a number of. I had a top secret SCI from the time I was first fully mission ready in the F-111 until the time I retired. And then I still have a TS, but I didn't need the SCI anymore. So it's
Right.
just a straight TS, top secret. But the programs that I dealt with when I was in the Pentagon and was doing studies for the Secretary of Defense, that was usually very highly classified work. So I have a lot of compartmented programs that I was read into. But once I didn't need access anymore, you're read out and your non-disclosure is for the rest of your life. And so, you just have things that are stuck in your brain that you can't talk about. So I got a lot of those and I won't talk about those, but
Don't.
hint wise, yeah, I suspect there's a lot of work moving towards that for the very reason that that would give anybody that has mastered that a very strategic advantage over any foe that would try to take you out.
And regular viewers will also remember Barry. Barry also worked on F-111s, but at Lakenheath many years later, where he also saw a craft and a cryptid creature while stationed at RAF Feltwell, which was his accommodation. Barry shared with me off the record at first something really fascinating. His father in the 1950s was working on anti-gravity devices for the US government through defense contractors. And Barry tells a story that his father brings home a small device that he played with as a child, which floated across the garden.
The one that my father made was, I'm going to say, about the size of a typical hamburger and weighed just about as much as a hamburger. And as a matter of fact, the reason I say that is because I called it, when I was a kid, I called it a flying hamburger. Because this thing wants to move. You can sense that it wants to do something. If you just felt this thing and sit there and just concentrate on it and just feel it and feel its undulations and just basically think of the direction you want it to go, and your muscles will do it. Just kind of urge it and just think just enough and let it go, and this thing would just go, just like it was floating. And I get the distinct impression. Now there's a hillside in the backyard. I get the distinct impression this thing, if it hadn't run into the hillside, it would have just kept right on going.
Right. Dan and Barry have been very kind to me, and I often email them with annoying questions about military weapon systems, which they answer as best they can. Dan obviously had above top secret clearance. He still has top secret clearance, but won't talk about deployed or operational weapons that are being used today. Barry's the same and is loyal to national security, but both will talk about the ideas, concepts, and give hints to what actually does exist. So I just had to get these two gentlemen together. They've never met, and this is the first time they've actually talked about physics and the military. And I mean, I was gobsmacked. Barry talks about anti-gravity, and Dan talks about TR-3B, the triangular craft that was seen in the US, UK, and on the Belgium wave of sightings in the 1980s. This is gold dust. These two retired experts in the field really know what they're talking about. Both of their careers span a fascinating era, the era where advanced military aviation propulsion and directed energy weapons were being developed and used. So I suggested that they meet. And what happened was magical. I listened to over an hour of these two senior Air Force officers actually talking about the secret stuff that they are allowed to talk about. If you're interested in anti-gravity, in directed energy weapons, and advanced propulsion systems, this conversation is priceless.
Hey, everybody, this is a real honor. Two F-111 pilot jockeys, one who flew them and one who fixed them when they were broken. Hi, Dan, and hi, Barry. First of all, thank you for your Cold War service. We won. The wall fell down and the world didn't end. Who knows what's happening today? Anyway.
Right.
Everybody, you've individually met Dan. Dan is a test pilot, but during the Cold War, he flew F-111s at Upper Heyford in Oxfordshire, and Barry fixed F-111s amongst lots of other planes at Lakenheath, and both of them have had unusual experiences. But today we have decided, the three of us, likely lads, to get together to talk about physics, because physics of flying, physics of military physics is something that we've all been involved with over the years. And as I was just saying to Dan before we hit record, that, you know, ever since Trinity, ever since the Manhattan Project, the military have looked for weapon systems, gravity modification, directed energy weapons, phased array radar, and things like that, stealth, to get the advantage. So, Barry, why don't you start? Why don't you introduce us to some of the physics that you've come across in your life? Do you want to tell us about your father, or do you want to tell us about what you've done?
Sure. Let me get my magic candy.
Don't eat it all at once.
Yeah. So I have to assume the character role.
Oh, you have to put your hat on.
Okay. So there, see.
I love it.
Now I'm a distinguished individual, and I have the magic abilities to
You got a
talk on
white
these
beard
topics.
as well, right? Good.
Right. So, okay. So, how I started with the electronics aspect of things was from a very young age. And my father was totally into electronics.
Right.
And he's beyond a doubt, he's a wizard when it comes to electronics. You know, the guy's a machine when it comes to this stuff, you know. So if you can imagine me at 3 years old, I wandered out of the yard because my mother wasn't watching me, and I went up the street and went through somebody's junk pile and found an old radio.
Oh, yeah.
And I brought it back, and plugged it into the side of the house.
Aha.
And so I'm going to be just like my dad. And I had a screwdriver and some other odds and ends, and so hammer and whatever, So I'm going to take the back off this, I plug it in, it won't play, you know what I mean? So I'm going to take the back off of this, be just like my dad. I'm going to fix it, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so I'm poking around in there with a screwdriver, and bam!
Bang!
This thing shocks me, you know?
Oh.
So my father is the type of person where he can do both. So
And
he was able
what decade was he trained, and when was he first working? This is post World War II.
right. He was in the Air Force.
Right.
He served during the Korean War.
Right.
Yep. And I believe he was over in Okinawa, Japan. And aircraft mechanic, technician. Yeah.
Right.
When I was a young lad, my dad was always studying. We had books, rooms full of books,
Oh, great.
and complete everything you can imagine as far as electronics equipment and test equipment, and a large stockpile of components, for his experiments. And he got to the point early on where he could design. Once he understood all the principles and everything, then he went into designing these gadgets. And then he realized I had an interest in electronics too. And what he did was he proceeded to formulate a learning curve for me. And he provided me with whatever I needed to get into it and to be able to grasp very complex things in the electro manuals and physics books and stuff like that.
Your dad wasn't just tinkering at home; he was going to work. He was working for somebody.
Oh yeah, he was working for companies with leading edge technology.
Right.
And I mean, absolute leading edge technology. He was working with microwave, what we have in our cell phones now.
Right.
He was working with microwave, say like the AT&T long lines communication network. You familiar with that? When that came out way back, 50s, 60s, microwave technology, all the way back in the 50s, So he was onto it. And that's where he was at with, like I said, right there on the leading edge of technology, on the design board of several companies.
Right.
Important government contractors, whatever, such as like Harris Corporation, Harris Transducers, Data Controls, which then got absorbed into a company called Consolidated and became Consolidated Controls.
Oh yeah. Your dad goes on to start thinking about advanced physics and about time, space-time, and gravity. But now let's go over to Dan and say, so Dan, hi.
Hi.
Did you have a similar background of any type? I mean, obviously you have transitioned from flight training into physics. What was your earliest memories of sticking screwdrivers into radios? I did it.
I've tinkered a little bit, but I did not have the kind of, my father's background wasn't that at all. He grew up a sharecropper, so he knew about farming and picked a lot of cotton. But when World War II started, right after Pearl Harbor, he decided to leave school. He hadn't even completed 11th grade, lied about his age, and joined the Navy.
Uh,
So unfortunately, not like Barry, I did not have a paternal influence that sort of shaped me. But I did convince him when I was younger to buy us some Britannica encyclopedia set.
yeah.
And so I did have the encyclopedias, and I was
Yeah.
constantly tinkering on things. So
Uh,
for instance, when I took a typing course, I think in the 8th grade, I took a typing course, and we had these mechanical typewriters, and most of them didn't work. They were jammed up. They weren't, operating. So as the teacher left the room, I thought, well, I can't do the exercise. So I literally took mine apart, figured out what was wrong, and fixed it. And when she came back in the room, it was working. And she said,
see.
"Hey, did you do that?" And I thought I was in trouble. And I said, "Yeah." So she said, "Well, we've got a guy that's supposed to be coming and keeping these typewriters working, and he never shows up. I've got a whole room full of broken typewriters. You think you could fix them so we'd have more for people to work on?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a
Actually,
shot."
yep.
So she put me in that room, and every time I showed up for typing class, she took me down the hall, unlocked the door, and put me in the storage room and had a little work table so I could work on typewriters. So I spent that entire
Wow.
course fixing typewriters and not learning to type then. But,
Right.
it was
Yep.
just, it was an opportunity for me to use what apparently I was born with, and that's that intuitive, science-oriented, mechanic-oriented kind of
Right.
brain. And she
Yeah.
gave me an A+ for that year
Oh, I
of
bet.
class because I was just fixing all the typewriters for her. Barry had a great start for like
Yeah.
grooming his mind early on,
Yep.
and that's wonderful. And from everything he's told me, his dad was, really involved in a lot of high level work with
Yeah.
government
Yeah.
contracts. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Do you think both of you, when you meet a piece of equipment, an airplane, whatever it is, you kind of imagine what and work out what's behind you and what everything is doing? You have a mental picture of the
Right.
mechanical function. When you move a stick, you feel the bell cranks and the
Yes.
push rods and the
Yep.
pulleys. Is that
Yep.
yeah,
Oh
I've
yeah.
heard that before from people.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yep. That's
Yeah.
essential. It really is.
Right. It's not
And it's
just
very
a
essential for.
a check engine light that comes on. No, long before that, you're. I've heard a vibration. I know, and
Yeah.
I know where it's coming from. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You feel this thing. You're in the machine.
right.
You're right there in it. You're part of it, and you feel it. You sense every little signal you can get. You know, um,
Right.
it's just like the old pilots will tell you. They love to fly by the seat of their pants. They don't
Yeah,
want this autopilot crap or anything. They want to fly it. You know.
yeah. But when they got even, but of course they get super sophisticated, and then then have to. Do you have both of you? Do you have like a mental image of software? So do you understand? Maybe error problems in fly-by-wire and redundancy. Do you have that mental image as well? You
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
yeah.
One of the courses
Yep.
as a test pilot student, you have to learn the feedback loop control system
Right.
concepts so that you
Right.
can actually design software experimentally and flight test it with a simulator first. And then when you think you've got it pretty well fine-tuned, they have a variable in-flight stability flight simulator.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's called the Vista. It's a F-16 with a lot of modifications, and they can actually program that in. Before they had that, when I was a student, they had a Lear 25.
Right.
So they had a Learjet, and on the right side, the right pilot seat, you had a stick, and you could choose from center stick or side stick, and it was completely fly-by-wire for
Oh,
that Learjet.
right.
But in the F-16, you sat in the front cockpit, and they could take your designed flight control algorithms, plug them into the airplane, and it would fly based on your software, and you could see how well or not well that it flew, and could then go back and refine it based on the characteristics you were feeling and observing in the aircraft. It was really a very elegant way to build that brain picture in
Mm,
each of the students so that if you are involved in a new aircraft with a fly-by-wire type flight control system, you understand what's going on inside the circuitry
right.
and
Right.
would have an idea of how to speak with the design engineer once you're in flight and you felt things that weren't quite right and needed some tweaking. Because
Right.
the designer of the software is not a test pilot,
They're not
so
pilots,
it's sort of
right?
that interface, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a critical skill to learn.
Yeah.
And as I was speaking with you earlier, Simon, the qualitative evaluation program,
Yeah.
we train students to be able to go out to an aircraft they've never seen before,
Mm,
hop in and figure it out and go fly it. And that's how test pilots get so many different types and models of aircraft that they've actually physically flown. Not flown in, but been at the primary set of flight controls or in a single seat airplane
wow.
without a two-seat trainer, without a simulator, without anything. Just go make it happen. And
Yeah.
It's a
it
real
grows
challenge because I
in the
mean,
brain.
as a private pilot, occasionally we would have a different Cessna on the flight line, and even something like a different seat height or slightly different panel would
Yeah,
I would find confusing. It would throw me. You know, my sight picture would be slightly different if the padding
right.
was. So what a challenge is to jump into a system that you've not flown before at all. Wow, it's a real skill.
Yeah. And some of those experiences, like the U-2, were literally taking it to extreme because the U-2, at
Yeah.
least when I flew it, it was still a very simple design. It was bell cranks and steel cables, and there was
Right.
no hydraulics, there was no feedback loop. You're just manually flying the airplane like
Wow.
kind of like the Wright brothers, and there was
Sure.
no auto throttle, no autopilot. So you were in control the whole time. Because the control forces would get pretty pretty high, the forces that you used to control, it didn't have a stick, it had a yoke.
Good.
And so you're flying with a yoke, like same one that's in the 707 or the KC-135 tanker aircraft.
Wow.
And then feeling that aircraft, because it flies more like a sailplane, was
Mm.
very artful thing. So I got a chance to um, take it to 60,000 feet before I went up to the classified altitudes and just run the ringer on evaluating its handling qualities and feeling it out and getting to know the aircraft. And then once I took it up to where you can see the curvature of the Earth,
Right.
it was just an amazing experience. And to think that the operational pilots in that will fly like 12 plus hour missions
Yeah.
in that single seat cockpit um, in a spacesuit, and it's a wild career to be in. I think if for people that do it operationally, I have a great respect for them. It's the most pilot demanding aircraft that I ever
Mm.
flew, followed in a close second by the B-52. That also took a lot of skill
Does it?
and understanding the uniqueness of it.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And Barry, you've worked. Obviously, we talked about Lake and Heath and F-111s, but you told me that if it's got an F in front of it, you probably fixed it. You know,
That's right.
all
That's right.
all the
That's right.
100 series. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one, incidentally, uh, which I had the honor of working on too. One of them just went down the other day, had to do a belly landing. It's the B-57.
Oh yeah.
B-57, Canberra. I I don't know if Dan saw it or not on TV, but it had to do. It was a NASA. NASA is still flying some of these old B-57s.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they're highly modified YB-57s, and they use them for high altitude research.
yeah,
Absolutely. Amazing aircraft. I mean, obviously it's a British design, and
yeah.
it actually. Correct me if I'm wrong. You two will know more than I do, but it set quite a few records in altitude, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of the earliest high flying jets. Yeah, good, excellent
Yes,
airframe.
Yeah, and those
yes.
it's when the plane comes in, the pilot might tell you fill the oil and just check the gas because the engines had a constant loss oil system,
Oh,
so they would consume quarts of oil for every
quartz.
hour of flight time. So that was a big thing that I remember with that aircraft was it almost used more oil than it did fuel.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, yeah,
So, Barry, let's go back to your dad. And so, he then started becoming interested or employed, maybe, who can say, in what I would call advanced physics, and started getting into systems. Was that involved, the kind of exotic physics? Was this a funded thing that he was doing, or just something out of interest? Do you think he was working for somebody who was paying him to look at gravity and space time?
Well, he did do some consulting work,
Uh,
but I can't really tell you what the interface was between what he did privately on his own and what he did professionally. I really don't know
right,
because he really just couldn't even talk about it,
right.
what he did, at the time. But I can give you a couple examples.
Yeah,
So I was always bugging my dad, like a typical kid, you know, Dad, what are these flying saucers? And you see flying saucers on TV and
right.
whatever, and he, and then, so I was always asking him and then one day we were driving and we actually saw a flying saucer.
Right.
And I don't know what was up with that. That would have been probably probably 1964, maybe somewhere around that time frame. And so I asked him, "What is that? How does that work?" You know what I mean, and everything,
Right.
And he really couldn't tell me much, but he said there's several types. Some of them work on different concepts. And basically what he said at that time, he was kind of kidding around with me or whatever. He said that one was probably a resonant cavity concept. Whereas it's not a manned aircraft.
Okay.
It's a resonant cavity that has a material hull to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the all the magic takes place inside with parametric and self-resonance inside, and and that's where you get this gravity negation, cancellation or whatever. Basically can cancel the signal of gravity, or disconnect it. I'm
sorry, I'm such a bad interview. I'm going to have to interrupt because I have a question.
That's all right.
So today we talk about the 5 observables, or maybe 6 observable, the 6 being human injury, which definitely has occurred with UAP. And those observables very much have come from military defense contractors who have been looking at the observables of an unknown aerial phenomenon, UFOs, whatever you want to call them. Back in the day, do you think it sounds very much like your dad knew how to categorize them. So do you get the impression that they, whatever they are, were being studied?
Oh, my father knew exactly what they were. I'm sure he was involved in various designs of these things,
Oh,
and powering them, frequency stabilization, so that you get the right frequency mixing for this thing to perform what it does.
right.
Um, I'm sure he was right there on the wave, the crest of the wave. You know what I mean? Of these man-made, concepts. Um, so that's where we have to realize, the public and everybody, all of us, we want to know, are there aliens that come here or whatever, Um, but I would say, just a reasonable guess, I would say 99% of what we see is man-made, and
Right.
the reason for that is, as we go more in depth into this presentation, we'll come to the realization that we've had this technology since going all the way back into the 30s, in various forms. Um, and what I'd like to do is tie it together for your viewers, that what we see in all this bizarre looking technology is really just different flavors of things that we already have and use.
Right.
And that's really, everybody wants to think that there's some bizarre thing in outer space or something, you know what I mean? um, which there very well could be.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we are in charge of all this stuff that's being seen. It's us, you know
I definitely get the
um,
impression, I don't know, Dan, if you've ever heard this, is the kind of 101 security misinformation rule book is tell them it's aliens.
Well,
exactly
no doubt,
right.
no doubt
Certainly
that that
during the
was,
stealth era, I heard that
yeah,
there was a lot of flying saucer and the U2 era as well,
yeah,
that the UFO story was used. Have you come across
yes,
that as
absolutely.
misinformation?
Yes, that was a strategy, as a
Right.
CIA recommended strategy to throw people off from knowing about certain things that we do in very secluded areas, like we now know Area
Yeah.
51 was one of those areas, not the only one, but one of the prime areas. And of course, its early heritage was to develop the U-2. And then after that, the SR-71, those are known advanced programs that came out of testing from there. Um, but that work clearly has not stopped. It still goes on. There's still work being done out there, and quite often, uh, it was it was actually something they were happy about when people described a UFO, as
Right.
opposed to being on to the fact that there was some new flying machine, or maybe our own anti-gravity kind of construct. The concepts have been around for, literally, I would say in the modern era, it would be Nikola Tesla that was probably the farthest along on how electromagnetic energy could be used in very new and creative ways.
Right.
And there have been other inventors. Some of them were British, like John Searle with
Right.
the Searle effect generator,
Yeah,
and that's quite fascinating how that worked,
yeah,
and how he said he received it through dreams. He didn't
Hmm.
mathematically come up with it. He just implemented stuff that had somehow been given to him through the consciousness field.
yeah.
And that was all confiscated by the government and all of his papers and working prototypes. But it had an interesting effect that he described is that more load you put on it, the colder it got.
Ooh.
So that would indicate that he was somehow tapping into the quantum vacuum or zero point energy, because if you're moving energy from the surroundings, removing energy from the atmosphere, removing energy from all the surroundings, that's going to actually show up as a very pronounced temperature decrease.
Yeah, good
And he said
point.
that the more load that he put on the device, the faster it spins, and then eventually, not knowing that this would happen, he said that one time early on in his experiments, it literally went anti-gravitic and
Hmm.
launched itself through the roof of his shed,
That's
never to
right.
be seen again. So um, it's fascinating stuff if true, and
Yeah.
it's just out there in the lore that people have, and there's people with YouTube videos that show that they can do some mild anti-gravitic stuff, but normally when that's put out there, it's very quickly quashed by whatever government is in
I
charge.
notice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that sort of speaks to um, what Barry's saying that yeah, we may have multiple types of craft that are man-made and yet have achieved something akin to what we would say was a often called an ET craft.
Right.
And I don't know what's the same or different. I know that there are people that say that when you look at the man-made ones, there are certain features to them, the structure and so forth, that
Right.
it's just it doesn't look as smooth as a craft that is truly exotic.
Right.
And
I
I
mean,
have no like personal knowledge of any of that, fortunately, so I can speculate, which is what I'm doing,
I get
because I
that.
was never read into any of those types of programs.
Have
Yeah.
you? I mean,
Well,
I'm such a tart. Have you ever been asked to fly something that you didn't recognize or didn't understand or was
Me,
unusual?
no, no, I was selected for an assignment at Area 51, but uh, just as I was about to go there, the four-star general sent me to yet another school and put me in charge of something else.
Okay.
So I've been there. I'm familiar with a lot of the other kind of classified work that they've done, but I was never
Hmm.
asked to fly an exotic craft. I've had friends, test pilot friends, who did serve out there, and one of them was the project test pilot for one of the Boeing creations
Right.
that looks. It was very exotic, but it was a subscale aircraft. It's now hanging in the Air Force Museum above the YF-22, the original test airplane for the F-22. Um, and it was called the Bird of Prey,
That's right.
but I think it's YF. Uh, it's got a number on it that was given to it for. I forget it's like the 113 or
Hmm.
some kind of nomenclature, but best known as the bird of prey, and it had wings that sort of canted down and a
Right.
canard up front. Yeah.
Oh. And
So
have you ever come across a I'm so terrible. Have you ever come across a technology or a operational system on board an airplane that you think I don't know where this came from? I mean, maybe an exotic stealth coating or a metamaterial or even a communication device that seems like, whoa, this has come out of the blue. You don't have to say, by the way.
well, I would say that the technologies involved with creating stealth coatings, and I was in charge of the F-22, so I
Right.
can't speak to that in full, but yeah, some fairly exotic materials are part of that equation of being able to, in some cases, reflect off in a different direction, a radar beam, in other
Sure.
cases, absorb the radar energy without responding.
Hmm.
And there's an ever evolving art form to that. Of course, the YF-12 and the early versions before the SR-71 was created, was the first attempt to do some degree of stealth in the shaping of the aircraft. But it wasn't until the F-117 that we really had developed something that was a significant leap forward. And since that time, both the F-22, which was its requirements were finalized and locked in place in 1989, while the Soviet Union was still there, and it
Yeah.
was, really
Mhm.
optimized to help us win that fight if it ever broke out. But since then, the F-35 series, which is also a stealthy aircraft, has employed yet another type of technology and a more advanced technology.
Right.
And what is going into the B-21 and the
Right.
new F-47 sixth generation is even more advanced than any of that. So it's a continually evolving field, but the physics of it and the materials themselves are obviously highly classified.
Sure. Do you get the impression? I mean, I've spoken to people and looked at the physics of metamaterial, which is a material which might redirect specific frequencies such as microwave energy from a radar system. But have you ever come across other stealth ideas that could make aircraft, say, optically invisible, or maybe the use of plasma to shield areas of the aircraft, or is that a bit sensitive?
Well, it is. I will say, that when I was a test pilot school instructor,
Hmm.
one Friday, I think I shared this story briefly with one of our former interviews.
Yeah.
I had just in my own brain come up with a theory of how you could make an aircraft optically disappear.
Right.
And I was just, I wasn't aware of any program, wasn't classified as far as I knew, and two men in suits. They weren't men in black, but they were just not in uniform, came in to the group where I was at the officers club
Hmm.
and grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Sir, you got to come with us." And they took me off to a secluded room and they said, "How do you know about that?" Because they're thinking, the classification somehow has leaked out because I'm not on the
Right.
bigot list, I'm not
Sure.
authorized to know about this. And I said, "Know about what?" And they said, "What you were talking about." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about it. I'm just theorizing in my brain." They said, "Well, don't you ever talk about it again because we got a program doing that." So yeah.
Right.
And I never ever then shared and won't share
No.
what my concept was for it. But yes, there's clearly ongoing efforts to create what we would think of as like a Star Trek Romulan cloaking device that
Sure.
would make a craft seem to disappear. It doesn't really disappear, of course, but it's about um, moving the light rays and bringing what's behind it around and recreating it in front or above it or
Sure.
whatever angle.
Three-dimensionally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, but yeah, the details of that are clearly highly classified. And so there's active work going on.
I know.
What we've achieved or haven't achieved, I don't know.
Right.
Uh, I was cleared into a number of. I had a top secret SCI from the time I was first fully mission ready in the F-111 until the time I retired. And then I still have a TS, but I didn't need the SCI anymore. So it's
Right.
just a straight TS, top secret. But the programs that I dealt with when I was in the Pentagon and was doing studies for the Secretary of Defense, that was usually very highly classified work. So
Right.
I have a lot of compartmented programs that I was read into. But once I didn't need access anymore, you're read out and your non-disclosure is for the rest of your life. And so, you just have things that are stuck in your brain that you can't talk about. So I got a lot of those, and I won't talk about those, but
Don't.
hint wise, yeah, I suspect there's a lot of work moving towards that for the very reason that that would give anybody that has mastered that a very strategic advantage over any foe that would try to take you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So naturally, there would be some desire to achieve those kinds of advantages, just like there has been through the years of evolution of radar stealth and how
Right.
amazing that's become.
Yeah, very much so. So these technologies, Barry, were things that were being worked on by defense contractors and more. So your dad obviously got very involved in a project, either personally or funded, to look at gravity manipulation. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah,
Do you want to
I
tell us?
really,
Do you want to tell us about he managed to build a device
yeah,
um, and demonstrated and actually gave one to you? That is just an amazing story.
yeah. Okay, this device, I have something similar here.
Oh,
Okay. Um, this one's larger and heavier than the one my dad made. This is for a different purpose. This is a step up transformer that I designed,
all right,
and it works very well.
right.
But the one that my father made was, I'm going to say, about the size of a typical hamburger and weighed just about as much as a hamburger. Um, and as a matter of fact, the reason I say that is because I called it when I was a kid. I called it a flying hamburger.
All
Okay.
right.
So, um, this is powered by a depleted 9-volt battery. Um, so if I don't know the specs on it, um, but like I said, this is my father's forte, is entertaining fields and frequencies and all at once suspended and interacting, and that's what he did. So to me, like I said, this thing looked about the size of a hamburger, and I could tell if I analyze it, you know what I mean, toroidal coils, like donut coils, and then additional coils that are pigtailed, wrapped around in a
Right.
certain configuration on the outside of it. So, he never would discuss this with me. As a matter of fact, he let me play with it one time for about 20 minutes. Then he took it away. He told me it gave off radiation, and
Right. So
the
what was
only
it?
other,
What did it do?
basically, if you're holding it in your hand, you could feel some kind of energy.
Hmm.
Um, and it wasn't really a vibration. It was more or less something going on. You can't quite put your finger on it. You know what I mean? It's this
Hmm.
thing wants to move. It wants, you can sense that it wants to do something. You know, it's weird. Um, whereas like if you're holding a gyroscope in your hand,
Right.
it has an analog action reaction thing that you can decipher, and
Sure.
a gyroscope. You know what I mean? This thing was different than that. This thing wanted to flop into different modes. If you can imagine a gyroscope that wants to lock into different angles,
Hmm.
and that's the way it acted. So if it was just sitting there, and if you could hold it perfectly still, and I really mean perfectly still, it would settle down and it would kind of go static. You know what I mean? Just flat, no reaction or whatever. If you moved it at all, it would try to oppose whatever movement you put into it. It would
But
reorient
hang on,
it.
wait, is this? Are you saying that this is a device sitting on a table, or are you saying this is a device in midair?
Both. If you
Oh,
set it on the table, in other words, if you just set it on the table, it orients itself to whatever frame of reference is in the environment. and it calms down. It maintains its whatever frequency and energy it's entertaining within itself. You know what I mean? It maintains that, and it all settles down and just kind of automatically planes out, and it's just fine. And as soon as you move that, it wants to do something else. So in other words, if you try to move it this way, it wants to tilt and go that way.
Okay.
It's just nuts. So if you're holding it in your hand, and if you concentrate, you can hold it perfectly still, and it will just sit there. If you move at all, this thing will react and counterpoise itself,
Right.
in some way.
So there was a force acting on it, or it was generating a force that had a vectored propulsion.
Exactly.
A bit like a
Exactly.
gyroscope, but
Right.
but solid state, no moving parts. Right.
There you go. It's an electronic gyroscope effect.
Right.
That would be an accurate description of the way it, the way I analyzed it or whatever. Be like electronic gyroscope.
Right.
But
Barry, you're kind of missing the point here. Did it fly in the air?
Yeah. It sucks in information and puts information out, or whatever it's doing, disconnects itself from the environment.
So did you use it in a room, or did you take it outside?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Right. Go ahead.
So he brought this up to my room. I think I was about, I don't know, somewhere around 8 years old.
Right.
And we had I had always, him and I had discussed all sorts of things and concepts. And by this time, I'm into actually building things. Like at this point, I've built numerous crystal radios. I've built numerous one transistor radios and tube radios too,
right.
And power supplies and et cetera, et cetera. So one day out of the clear blue, he walks into the room, into my bedroom where I got all my shit, and so I have my own science lab in my room, and he hands me this thing and he shows me, okay, this is the battery. He says, use only this battery. So I'm gathering that was a depleted battery, because what I believe he was trying to tell me is only use this battery because it's somewhat depleted. If you put in a fully charged battery, the damn thing's liable to ignite and go into another dimension, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? But it had a little cavity on the bottom of it with a piece of whatever, rubber or foam or whatever. So you could stick the battery in there and it would stay put.
Right. So what happened when you put the battery in?
It would just activate, and you would know it activated,
right.
Because it would immediately start doing its dance. You know what I mean? Acts like it's trying to find its rest point. It acts like it doesn't want to be anywhere. You know what I mean? You put it here and it wants to go there. And if you move it a little bit, then it wants to go here. And this is just the way the darn thing acted,
Right.
So I was fumbling around with it, and what you had to do, whether it heated up or whether the battery went down or who knows what, but occasionally you would have to disconnect it, let it rest, put the battery in and make contact again to reinitiate it. Mm-hmm. So it would lose its frequency stability or whatever was going on in there. So you'd have to whack it a couple times with the terminals, get it to jump back into its mode, and the battery would sometimes fall out. It was awkward thing that he had cobbed together, you know. So the battery would fall out, and you're trying to catch it. And I dropped the darn thing, and I'm like, oh shit! But before I knew it, it didn't go straight down. It went over the trajectory, and kind of, I don't know if you can see my hand.
Yeah.
Went like this into the edge of the trim baseboard.
Yeah.
Around part of my room, bumped into that and kind of wobbled and then settled right down. Okay.
Oh, so it had a glide slope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Had a glide slope, and it just went along and hit the baseboard, and then kind of just, you could detect a slight movement, and then it kind of settled down into its rest point, you know. So I thought, wow, that's nifty, you know. And so, so me being the little bastard that I was, I'm going to try this again. You know what I mean? Sure. And I'm holding on to it, and I let go of it. It just went bam on the floor, you know? So I'm like, shit, you know? And so I tried it. If it did it once, it'll do it again, you know? So I dropped it a couple more times, and it kept hitting the floor. And in my mind, shit, my dad's going to yell at me. He's going to hear this thing hitting the floor because I'm upstairs in my room.
Right.
And he took off. He left me with it. Oh. So I figured, well, I'm going to go outside.
Take it on the grass. Yeah.
On the grass. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I took it outside. And what I came to, as I analyzed this thing, what I figured out was, if you let it go, it had a cyclic kick to it. If you let it go in its exact moment, it's like you completely disconnected it from gravity or whatever. I don't know. You know, you disconnected it from from gravity, you know, and it would do its thing. It would have a trajectory. Wow. So being the crafty little kid that I was, you know, I thought to myself, well, you know, I wonder if I could like launch this thing like you'd launch a little balsa wood airplane or whatever, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Launch this thing. So I tried to throw it or whatever, you know, see if it would do it. And it wouldn't. It wouldn't do a damn thing. Right. If you threw it, or if you tried to wing it like you would a Frisbee, it didn't do a damn thing. What you had to do, I know this is going to sound cuckoo, but if you just felt this thing, sit there and just concentrate on it and just feel it, and feel its undulations, and just think of the direction you want it to go, and your muscles will do it. You know, just kind of urge it and just think just enough and let it go, and this thing would just go, just like it was floating. And I get the distinct impression, now there's a hillside in the backyard. I get the distinct impression this thing, if it hadn't run into the hillside, it would have just kept right on going.
Right.
You know, and I'm not kidding. This thing, that's the way it acted, because it didn't gain any altitude, but it didn't lose much altitude either. It acted like it had locked into its frame of reference, inertial frame, whatever. Okay. And it's going along, and it's just going to keep right on going until something stops it. Wow. And that's it. You know what I mean? And then right about that time, I went over and retrieved it. It went about 30 feet. I went over and retrieved it, brought it back, walked back over by the front of the house. And my dad comes out. He says, all right, that's good. That's enough. And I'm like, well, what? He said, well, you can't play with it anymore. It gives off the radiation. You know what I mean?
Right. So, that's an interesting observation. And you didn't get the chance to put a fresh battery in it.
Oh, no. No, see, that's, you know, I'm sure whatever the reason was a very good reason. You know what I mean?
He knew something.
Right. He made it perfectly clear when he gave it to me and left it with me. that do not put in any other battery except for this one, you know. And my guess is, knowing my father, okay, he knew what I was going to do. He knew I would figure this out, okay? And when I dropped it, I'm sure he was right downstairs and he heard it hit the floor. Okay. And you see what I'm saying? And he knew what I was going to do. He knew I was going to take
And
it
you would figure
outside.
it out to get
Yeah.
it right. Right.
Yes, sir. And I know this is all hard to believe, but this is absolute God honest truth.
Sure.
Okay. That this is what happened. Okay. So, like I said, my father's a very, very intelligent man. He knew exactly what I was going to do. If there was any consequence or whatever, if there was any real consequence, he would have yelled at me for quit dropping it or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because he would have heard it hitting the floor. He would have known exactly what I was doing with it. And he knew exactly what I was going to do next, i.e., take it outside and play with it. Okay. And he knew, or he was observing from a distance possibly or whatever, you know, that I saw what it could do. And then he came and took it away.
It feels like to me that you needed almost a learning. It kind of learned you as a human needed to interface with it in a way that, as you say, incredibly delicate movements and
Yeah,
even almost just a thought process to
exactly.
stabilize it. It interfaced with
Precisely.
you as a person. Your father probably knew that.
Yeah, as weird as it sounds, I'm giving you the honest description of exactly what happened. And this is exactly the way it acted. It almost seemed as if it worked on intent.
Right.
Like minute muscle movements, if you think it, you know what I mean? Maybe there's just a minute movement or possibly electrical impulse from your nervous system that can interject enough impulse into this thing to send it. You know what I'm saying? And it was
Sure.
perfectly docile at that energy level. You know what I mean? It wasn't a, it didn't, I could feel it. It was, if I remember right, I think it was starting to get just maybe a tad bit warm, you know what I mean? But it wasn't, like I said, it was very docile. So,
Good.
so that was my genuine first hands-on experience with an anti-gravity device.
It's
Now,
amazing. It's incredible. Dan, I mean, how does you got questions? How does that whole device and the physics that I know you know about, how does it resonate with you?
Yeah, so I would, as he was first describing it, I was thinking about a solid state gyro system. When I started out in F-111s, we had inertial navigation system, and it had a very high speed beryllium ball that was, the reference, but it would drift over time and, it wasn't as accurate. And then later, solid state gyroscopic devices were played with and invented. And eventually, the ring laser gyro became sort of the standard. And that gets integrated with GPS these days so that it's constantly given the exact position. Of course, the GPS antennas are usually on the top of the aircraft, so if you're in a fighter and you're rolling and dive bombing, then during times when GPS is not giving it updates, it's just going on its own three-dimensional accuracy. And if you hold a gyro, it would behave a lot like what he said, but it certainly would not do anything but hold its reference. Now, if you tried to tilt it, it would resist that. There would be forces there you could feel. I've never held one in my hands, but just understanding the principles of how those operate. As far as it allowing itself to be on a very slight glide slope across, that one's hard to fathom because there's nothing specifically anti-gravitic about a solid state gyro system. But
Yep.
if I've always thought that electromagnetic forces are generally the way that you can defeat gravity, because gravity versus the electric force, the electric force is 10 to the 39th power
Massive.
stronger than
Mm.
gravity.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if you have an electromagnetic force that you can generate with the right frequencies and orientations, then I personally believe, though I've never experimented with it and don't have any inside knowledge on it, I believe that's how craft can do the things that we've seen them do, like these
Right.
instantaneous acceleration, the instantaneous stopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were within that same field, some toroidal field that's being generated for the craft, if you're an occupant and you're inside of that, the craft could be pulling, a million G's
And you
if it
wouldn't.
had its
Right.
mass, but you'd still be at 1 G and you wouldn't
Right.
feel that.
Right.
So, if you can believe um, the Edgar Fouché information about the TR3B,
Right.
where he said that it was able with the spinning mercury into a plasma effect,
Right.
Mm.
that toroidal field that was generated, he said, was able to cancel about 89% of its mass, and still it
Yeah.
had some thrusters out on the corners of the triangle,
3-axis
but they
control.
were, yeah, to give it
Right.
3-axis control, and just a little bit of thrust symmetrically from those would accelerate it at incredible rates, because you're only uh, doing 10% of its mass that you're having to
Right.
move.
So,
So if that's
gentlemen, you
true,
both worked in high-end Cold War advanced Air Force systems, flying them and fixing them. Do you think the TR-3B existed? Maybe not operationally. Was it deployed? I don't know. What have you both heard about that type of technology actually being constructed?
You want me to talk?
Yeah,
I
both of
would
you
say that
are insightful in this information.
if we just use retroductive logic, take some device like my father built as the core
Right.
in the center of the TR3, and then give it 3-axis control, you're in right there.
Right.
I mean, seriously, I don't know what else to say, because, and I understand what everybody's thinking, that this defies what we know about normal physics.
But does it? I mean, I think
Yeah.
physics. I think physics is very defined, has very defined parameters, and I think a lot of the physics people that I talk to hate this subject. They want to
Right.
stick to a standard model. And
Right.
if you can break out of that standard model and think a bit laterally, maybe these things are possible.
Right. Right.
Right.
And to me, you know, uh, I know I probably look like an idiot even suggesting that, what I just told you. The fact of the matter is that I can say from the goodness of my heart that we have control of gravity.
Right.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Okay, you have to understand that. And this is not something that just happened yesterday. This is something we've been entertaining for 80 years.
Right.
And mainstream physics doesn't cover this shit. Okay,
Maybe on purpose, right?
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
I
And
think it's hidden.
you know this,
Sure.
Dan knows this, I know this, and we
Okay.
understand this, then the reasons for it. Okay, but you can go all the way back to a conventional television set, right? Which incidentally, the grandfather or godfather of the conventional television set back in the day was KT Farnsworth.
Yeah.
Okay, now if you entertain and get some documentations on KT
I
Farnsworth,
know.
you also understand that he had a force field that he made.
That's right.
He made a viable, functional force field way back in whatever it was, late 30s or something. you know, and this is a real thing that you can duplicate. It's not a fictional force field from Star Trek. You can do a bench example of a functional force field to where when you want to touch it with your hand, it pushes your hand away.
Ooh.
Okay. And that is, you tell me how that works. You know what I mean? But that works. That's documented. You can go on. There's a young man. His name is Griffin G. Brock. Okay. And he is a genius. And he's duplicated these devices that KT Farnsworth did. And he has working bench examples of this functioning on videos.
That's
And you can,
fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
from what I've heard from people who worked in England, in Britain, is that when the Nikola Tesla desperate wanted to give the United Kingdom, sorry, it's got so many bloody names. It wanted to give England a death ray or a teleforce device
Right.
in the 1930s, and his timing was really bad because he tried to sell it to the prime minister who was doing a deal with Hitler, and so
Right.
it was never adopted. But I also hear that the concept was understood and was investigated, and the big takeaway from it was the physics. We understand how it works, but we don't have the ability to build a power supply of that magnitude to actually turn the damn thing on. And that
Well,
was
see,
the power aspect of it is very important.
right. Well, see, let me tell you something. Okay.
Right.
That's a fallacy.
Ah.
Okay. Okay. What we're able to glean intelligence or knowledge or whatever from the surface levels, us being surface dwellers. Michelle's laughing over there.
Yeah. Hi, Michelle.
us being surface dwellers, you know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
you know we got what we got, but nature has her ways. Okay. Nature has amplification processes and nullification processes, and you know, when you push something through nature, it creates, like if you take a sphere and you push it, the vectors change when you put a charge in motion.
Okay.
The vectors change and blossom out this way. And what happens then is the energy comes around and injects itself into the back end and propels it even faster.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? So nature has its own amplification process. And here's a prime example of that right here. This is my
Right.
my little transformer. I put 1 volt AC into this, okay?
Right.
And I get 1 volt with 1 amp. And out of this, I get 7.23 volts with just a shade under 2 amps.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's not
So out of space somewhere, this got a 700% increase in voltage.
Yeah.
Out of
Yeah.
space. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And if you cut this in half, you would see nothing but like a coil of wire. But there's actually 3 coils in here, and the coils are shaped a certain way.
Okay.
And what you can do is you throw this thing into a process called quadrature. Okay. And that's not a new thing. It's an old thing. You throw it into quadrature. And what it does is it takes signals, amplifies it, inverts it, and re-injects it at the right time, all automatically according to the laws of nature, right there in that winding of wire. If you orient the windings correctly and understand what's happening there. See, this is the key. If to a lay person, I hook I put 1 volt into it, I get 7 volts out of it. And you take it apart, there's nothing but a coil of wire. Sure. What the hell happened there? It's understanding the signal. Now, signal is a signal over time, right? And you have amplitude over time. You can break the signal into quadratures, spin them around, reimpose them.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I get
And
it.
nature will do that for you if you let her. Okay. So this crap about we don't have enough energy to do it, not necessarily. You see what
Okay,
I'm saying?
in a very conventional sense. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
There's sources of energy.
Right.
Dan, you're being quite quiet. I don't blame you. What's your take on um, exotic physics and the and g- gravity manipulation being real?
Yes, I definitely believe it's real. And we know from World War II that the Nazis were working with a device called die Glocke,
Yeah,
the bell. And the problem with it, it could literally go up and defy gravity, but they had no directional controls for it. They had not
right.
figured that part out. Um, I have a strong suspicion that the Pennsylvania UFO incident that people describe and have drawn pictures of it that have seen it look very much like that. We may
Does.
have brought that very device over
Mm, sure.
with the paperclip when we took all the scientists that we took, and of course, the
Sure.
Soviet Union took a number of their scientists as well.
Mhm.
Right.
And I can't help but believe that we've been doing research on this for a long time. And of course,
Oh,
if
yeah.
you go back in history and you look, there's a period in the 50s when there was all of this open talking about doing anti-gravity research, and
Yeah,
companies were going to,
yeah.
conventions and things, and there was a lot of excitement about it, and then it just went quiet.
Yeah.
So I don't
It was
believe that
swept
that
under the
means,
carpet.
yeah, I don't believe that that means that that activity stopped or that companies didn't continue to pursue it.
Right.
But I do believe that, like stealth and other things, the the country that masters that first has a great advantage over
Mm,
others.
mm,
And I believe that that is one of the reasons why the government has kept the UFO thing as a good disguise against what we're doing. Not that there aren't UAP
Right.
that don't have anything to do with that. It's not that I think that everything out there is stuff that we're doing, but I have no doubt that the alien reproduction vehicles and things that have been discussed in the past are definitely something that we worked with and did, and I think that it's just continued to advance over time.
mm. Yeah.
I think that we must have at some point created a
Mm,
TR-3B,
mm,
and Edgar Fouché, when he told what he knew, said that the more production version of that, there was a small one that was experimental, but the production version was, 100 feet across. So a
Ooh.
mm,
very, very large craft.
mm, mm.
And maybe the Belgian Wave, which was a triangular craft, and it had
Right.
the center part that had a certain glow to it, wasn't like a searchlight beam,
Mm.
and then it had the other uh, smaller things on the corners. That
Yeah.
very much sounds like the
Does.
TR-3B.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that was years ago. So what do we have now? And
Yeah, good
what
point.
are we actually
Well,
doing?
let
And
me jump.
Dan, when you saw the craft at Upper Hayford, could it be man-made or did it have different qualities? I mean, you
Well,
saw a UAP on when you were leaving the base.
yeah. So I don't know. I can, looking at 1980 as the specific date, December 26th of 80, uh, I couldn't rule out that it could
Right,
be, a craft that we created. It's just that I had no knowledge about that.
right,
And it was my first exposure to anything where the light emissions on the bottom were not at all like light bulbs, and the colors were constantly changing and blending,
right.
like the aurora borealis that you see, in the
Right.
night lights when the sun's energy is intersecting, coming
Right.
into the magnetic poles of the earth and ionizing plasma in the atmosphere.
Yeah,
And depending on what altitude and which gases are energized by the various frequencies, you'll
Color.
get different colors dancing
Yeah,
around.
great.
Right.
And that's what this craft was doing. And I had never witnessed that before.
Right.
So I do think from what I know now, which is, certainly a lot more than what I knew then. See, I was 24 years old
Oh,
at that
wow.
point, and
Right.
just kind of finally 6 months earlier checked out to be fully mission ready with my top secret SCI clearance. But none of that kind of stuff was part of my career at that point. So it was quite extraordinary, and I did not think of it as anything man-made in the moment.
Right.
But I know now, looking back and having studied the phenomenon for a lot of years now, privately, not professionally, but
Right.
I do think that it's possible. Can't rule out that we didn't have something like that even back then. I will say that when I saw it, it was beyond anything that I had ever seen or knew about or studied, because it did not behave like an aircraft. It doesn't behave like a helicopter. It had unique properties where it seemed to just defy all the laws of physics that apply to things that move aerodynamically. There were no
Yeah.
wings, there was no
Yeah.
Yeah.
visible propulsion source. So
Right.
I surmised that its propulsion had something to do with those colors that were moving around the bottom base. They were kind of bleeding up into the structure above that base of the triangle.
Sure.
And as a person that studied the electric force quite a bit, and I have a lot of electrical engineering as part of aerospace engineering, and I've worked
Yeah.
with a lot of electromagnetic stuff, especially with directed energy weapons.
Yeah.
So I think the Dan of now, 70 years old instead of 24 years old, sees that as plasma. I was seeing a display of plasma,
Right.
and plasma is that fourth state of matter where you have
Right.
the electrical charges are separate now, and you have ions, which have a positive charge, and free electrons. And depending on the energy and frequency states of those, that creation of plasma can give off varying colors. And I understand plasma now. I didn't understand plasma then, but that's how I would see it.
Mm.
And I think that knowing more about the electromagnetic spectrum and how useful it can be, specifically now directed energy weapons, and understanding how to make those, how they work, and what they're useful for, I can't rule out that people have played around with the electromagnetic spectrum
Right.
in this other principle that may have originally come from studying the Die Glocke, the German
Right.
bell,
Right.
and the experiments that the Nazis were doing. Have
Wow.
we advanced to the point where we can do that in a solid state fashion? Who knows? But
Yeah.
I have no doubt that we've continued to make scientific progress on that, and that the science for that is by great intent kept secret.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not known, and it is science,
Yeah.
but is not conforming to the standard model.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So
And
I could
Barry,
add,
you also saw craft which weren't flying aircraft at Lakenheath. Uh, so, I mean, so you must have had that same kind of feeling that these aren't probably man-made. Did you understand what you saw? I mean,
I did, but I was blindsided at the time. It was the
yeah,
last thing. It was the last thing from my mind. That we would be conducting these um, live deployment of these you know assets, experimenting with our own people. Apparently,
yeah,
no, like I said, I don't want to do anything to discredit anything the government would do. But if we just use logic, we could say, well, we'd have to test it under actual circumstances.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? We really would, and then, to add back, I mean, to go back to my father's flying hamburger. What we need to understand about mass and inertial mass and vector physics and all this stuff like this is when you have electrical field, you have a blossom. Well, electricity flowing through a wire doesn't actually flow through the wire.
No.
Most of it's on a skin effect and a blossom in the dielectric around the wire.
Yes.
Right. So my father's device, there was no core to it. It was all windings.
Yeah.
Windings transposed against other windings and windings wrapped around to form a containment pattern of a capacitive, because most of the electricity, when it blossomed, was in the form of dielectric capacitance.
All right.
Okay, so when you get into dielectric capacitance, instantaneously that goes to I don't know, was it T. Townsend Brown
Right.
that did the anti-gravity stuff, or
In the 50s, right. Mm-hmm.
with capacitive asymmetric capacitors, stuff like that. So I guess what I'm getting at is my father's device in that particular instance, in that style of unit, would generate a capacitive field around it. And depending on what the frequency was, it would have just taken gravity like an ant on a picnic table and gone bing.
Oh, wow.
You see what I'm saying? Gravity is nothing compared to the energy you're entertaining in this capacitive field. You know what I'm saying? And then, as a control feature or control element. Now, here's another thing I forgot to mention. When you turn this thing up this way, it shuts off. It loses its signal function or whatever. And I'm guessing, I never did this, but I'm guessing if you had it upside down and restarted it, it would reorient itself in that plane. Right. You see what I'm saying? But if it was live running and you turned it too far, it would shut itself off. Wow. That was another aspect I meant to mention, but I just remembered that.
Yeah, sure.
So that's another peculiar aspect of how this was sensitive to the flow of gravity. Let's say the flow of ether flow, perhaps.
Yeah.
Ether flow from space to the center of the Earth. You know what I mean? So when it's oriented, so many degrees this way, it can ingest the ether flow and possibly propel it out, or who knows, or process it. So, if you view this thing as a space-time ether processor, okay, then you could say, okay, the space-time element, and we know electricity and wave function and all this is all about time function. You know what I mean? Sure. The capacitive element of this thing, like Dan says, the optical function, or which is the same thing as frequencies. Optic is also frequencies, could route around the hulk of this thing and reform on the bottom of it. We'll say as an example, right? And this is what so many people report, similar type things, and it makes perfect sense from a mechanical aspect or from an electrical aspect. You have a field, and any waves or energy would come around and cohere possibly or adhere to the field and then go around and reform possibly fractally or whatever. They would right. Constructive and destructive interference possibly, you know what I mean? So when you get into the aspect just as a thought experiment, you can say, oh, okay, now I see what could be going on there. You know what I mean? Because and like Dan said, with the plasma energies, essentially a capacitive field is a form of plasma, and the degree and the intensity of the field would of course determine how it acted or whatever, and the spectrum of the signal would determine the wavelengths that we see in the colors, much like the northern lights, right?
Okay. Sure.
If you look at the northern lights, it's like curtains of energy, river flowing, you know what I mean? All graceful, but there's millions and millions of volts up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's all hanging in midair and entertaining
Amazing.
millions and millions of volts right up there in the sky. You know what I mean? And while we're on the topic of anti-gravity, we have to understand the true physical nature of the universe. And one example of that is when you simply put a boat in the water, the reason it floats is called displacement, right?
Right.
Okay. What you don't realize and what nobody wants to think about and nobody wants to even admit is that when you put a boat in the water, you are displacing the entire ocean. Okay. Fluid is not compressible.
Yeah, good point.
You put a boat in the ocean, you are literally offsetting the entire planet. And this is why people cannot grasp the type of physics we're talking about here concerning anti-gravity and UFOs, is because they can't relate micro, macro to cosmos or whatever, cosmic scales or whatever.
Good.
But nature is very simplex. Okay, she really is. She's very simplex. And what we see, and like Dan will say, I think he said that gravity was only, or electrical energy is 10 to the 39th, I think he said, exponentially higher than the force of gravity, right?
Right.
So, and then we take into consideration that what we see here on our planet in our 3D perception is 99% empty space.
Right. Of course.
Okay. Right. So,
Yeah.
okay, now we're not, and what is the rest of the fluff we see if it's 99% empty space? It's signals.
Right. Information.
It's information.
Mhm.
Information everywhere that fills the rest. The other 99% of the universe is all information.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you view my father's little device as a space-time information processor or any such device, right? It's literally factually what you're doing. You know what I mean? You have the space-time warpage effect, and what we have to do is just stop all this complex physics because nobody can understand it. Physicists spend 30 years studying these things out into space and whatever, and they still can't apply it because it doesn't even cover everything. You
Right.
spend 30 years on one avenue in physics and it doesn't cover the whole rest of the spectrum, you see?
Yeah.
So if you consider that the universe is 99% empty space, it's filled with information only,
Yeah.
okay? Now, you're not entertaining quantities of mass that we think we are.
We're
because
not mass. Right.
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 Now we're signals and energies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you just take signals and energies, just like a magnifying glass, if you go outside in the sun and say, yeah, okay, the sun shines on everything all the time, but it generally doesn't start fires. I mean, it can sometimes, but all you got to do is walk outside with one of these.
Yeah.
And you focus the beam, and now you start a fire, and you got like fusion energy happening. You know what I mean? Because of this, right?
It's a directed energy weapon.
It is.
Mhm.
It is. It is. It really is. So this is
Right.
what we need to open our minds. When people like me talk, or Dan can only talk about so much because he's,
Sure.
because of his clearances and everything. I'm not under such a thing.
Okay, good.
But if we do the research into basic electrodynamics, so we go back to
Yeah.
Weber. Okay, this is, yep, it's Andre. I think his name was Andre. Well, I think it was
Weber.
Andre Weber. Yeah.
Okay.
This will tell you how electricity goes through a wire. Most people don't even people that work in electronics and work in electrical circuits and everything, can't tell you a damn thing about electricity going through a single wire.
Right, because we build these models in physics and in everything like biology and how the human body works, and we're wrong, but they're kind of good enough. I mean, like, how does
Right.
an airplane fly? Well, we all
Right.
know that that
Right.
principle isn't quite right, the one that we
Right.
are
Right.
originally taught.
Yeah, you take F4 Phantom. F4 Phantom is an example, and I think Dan will know exactly what I'm talking about. An F4 Phantom is living factual proof that with enough thrust, even a brick can fly.
Is that right?
Right,
Yeah,
Dan?
it's
Yeah.
definitely I've flown the F4C, the
Yeah.
D,
Yeah.
and the E. The E was the first model to have a slatted forward wing,
Yep.
and that added some drag, but a tremendous increase in lift performance for the wing for doing dogfighting.
Yep.
And you could get yourself in trouble in a hurry with a C or a D because it became very unforgiving. And of course, you look at the wing tips have dihedral, and the entire horizontal tail is not horizontal, it's an anhedral.
That's
So you
right.
have clearly those were not in the original design,
Right.
but they had to start tweaking it to make it
Make it work.
aerodynamically stable enough. It
And
was
then
a
you had the
very
boundary
high
layer.
performance aircraft, but we
Yep.
used them in test pilot school. We would fly them to evaluate the handling qualities and the fact that it could bite you if in the final turn, if you
Yep.
didn't maintain very precise AOA control, especially in the C and the D model, it
Yep.
could just snap roll and you
Mm.
couldn't recover it. You're going to die in the final turn.
Yep.
And
The
so
other
those are things that you needed to study and learn about
right.
that. So clearly the
And the boundary
F-16
layer.
looks nothing like an F4.
And the boundary layer too. Boundary
Hmm.
layer control over the F4 wing, where to create a stable airflow, laminar airflow over the top of the wing, they introduced turbulence to create laminar flow. Totally
Hmm.
contradictory. With the boundary layer control system, you're actually introducing turbulence at one point to create stability over here, right
Oh, wow.
next to it. You know,
Yeah.
and this is like, for Simon or any of the viewers, it gets into shear forces, um,
Wow.
eddies,
Mhm.
twirlies, you know what I mean, and shear forces. And this is how, I'll just say it. I mean, this is how anti-gravity craft disconnect themselves from the 3D environment, is because of actual shear forces that are involved, separate the craft, um, physically separate the craft from the rest of the surrounding environment. And then once you accomplish that, you can put the craft's plane of inertia or center of gravity wherever you want.
Right.
You can tell the craft its center of gravity is over here somewhere, and it instantaneously wants to go there.
Right.
You see, this is what people see this all the time. I was watching this thing, and then it shot off that way.
Ah,
How did you do that? Well,
right.
here's how you did that. You told that craft that its center of gravity is 15 miles away. And what does it do through entanglement? It shoots right over there to catch up with itself.
Hmm.
And this is what people don't understand. The entanglement connection, the spooky action at a distance, and Einstein called it. It's a known factual process that particles and concepts or whatever can be entangled. Electromagnetics,
Sure.
positive and negative can't be separated. There's no such thing as a monopole. You know what I mean? It has to have polarity. And if it's simple pressure resolution. You have pressure here, lower pressure here, whatever it is, instantaneously shoots over here to find its rest point.
And you're saying that when we see things like that, it demonstrates the physics that must be involved in its own propulsion
Yeah.
or manipulation of space time or gravity, whatever. Yeah,
I got two magnets.
I
Okay,
like
this is a
them.
couple pieces of wood, but okay, two magnets,
Sure.
north south. Okay.
Right.
Now, when you put these magnets in attraction mode, they're going to suck each other together conceptually or whatever, and then make contact.
Bing.
And that's it, right? But here's the real deal. It doesn't quite want to do that. What it really wants to do is go all the way in here to the plane of inertia where it's a rest point, the block wall in between north and south. See, this is how magnets work. You think because what we observe and what we do is that the magnet just wants to hit the end of that and then stop.
Right.
What it really wants to do is go right through each other and end up at their mutual plane of inertia.
Right. An inertia point. Yeah.
It is. And that is, that is totally simple. It is perfectly understandable. There is no need for complex physics in this shit. All you have to know is that in magnetism, the magnets don't want to contact each other because of some obscure force that we can't define. What they want to do is find their rest point halfway.
I love it.
Like this.
That's a really thank you. That's a really good demonstration. I think this is great. I think we should draw a line under it. I think what's so special about this conversation, both Dan and Barry, is that both of you understand the physics, but you're also practical. You're not talking just equations. You're both of you have talked about physical systems. And
We're both crazy.
We're
both crazy too, because I know Dan's crazy if he got into an F-111 and flew it. You know what I mean?
Quite. But you needed to understand the physics of how it worked.
Yeah.
And that understanding makes you open-minded enough to think about bigger stuff. And so much of when I interview physicists, they don't talk about boundary layers and turbulence. They just talk about equations. So thank you both. I mean, I think it's brilliant to talk to you both.
To do real physics, you need popsicle sticks, rubber bands,
I like it,
and wooden clothespins.
I completely agree.
This is relevant because here's a rubber band, right? And a little,
show me.
Now, when you vibrate this electronically, it'll go like this. Okay?
Right.
Then it wants to turn because you have polarity on this side, different from this side. It wants to turn and it goes into a phenomenally fast, instantaneous spin. So something that was sitting here like this folds over on itself and spins violently and then reforms up again.
Which is an effect which you can observe, which might be you can exploit.
Yeah, and this is the thing when they do the like the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project with Bob Grenier. Have you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now you see under electron microscope, you see little twirlies like this emerging right out of the base material. And what you're seeing there is the time, space-time doing what space-time does. You know what I mean? And it'll have partially emerged things that are like little birdies, which is like half of this. You know what I mean? So if you have the one wing and then the other wing and then no half on the bottom, you have little birdies, little umbrellas, you know what I mean? And you have toroidal donuts at a subatomic level. And this is what we're talking about here when you get into anti-gravity. This is the juice or whatever that comes out of space time. You know what I mean? It's literally, what do you call it? Alchemical. What do they call that when you're manufacturing
Alchemy.
elements?
Alchemy, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's alchemy. Nature, Mother Nature is doing her own alchemy right there, forming substances that don't exist in the substrate.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you got a block of iron there or whatever, and she's making different materials come out of that block of iron that don't exist in there. You
Sure.
know what I mean? You
No,
know.
I know, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Lord
Yeah.
Rutherford at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, in a fantastic interview that I found, which was mute, it was silent, and I managed to find the audio for it. When I put it together for the first time, he describes himself as an alchemist. I was like, whoa, okay. Because he
Yeah.
understands how literally the transmutation
Yeah.
using subatomic, because he started understanding the internal structure of atoms, and
Sure.
and
And
he
this is
said,
where we're
well,
at.
I can make anything.
Sure. This is where we're at with this. If people want to understand UFOs, if they
Yeah.
genuinely want to understand UFOs, then they have to genuinely take a look at what we just talked about, because
Yes.
that's where it's at. Okay. You know what I mean? It's literally where it's at, and there is information out there. You can check into the
Sure.
Martin Fleischman Memorial Project. There's another individual, Dr. Robert Close,
Right.
uh,
Right.
classicalmatter.org. He does a great job of putting this stuff into digestible format for people to understand, because if you start arguing with a physicist, you never get anywhere, because they'll tell you everything that you just said is wrong. You
It's
know what I
wrong.
mean?
Basically, it's wrong. Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you both very much. I mean, I think it's absolutely brilliant that this conversation involved popsicle sticks and rubber bands.
Yeah, yeah, you have to go there in order to get it done. You really do have to go there. It's as
Brilliant.
crazy as it sounds. You really do. Like you said, a lot of it's intuitive, a lot of it's alchemical,
Yeah.
and it's real. You have to have that for the process to occur. It's like Maxwell's fourth equation that
Ah,
was so conveniently omitted, right?
yeah.
And that set us back 100 years right there, just by omitting that fourth equation. You know,
I know
just as an
that's
example.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
when Maxwell first came up with electromagnetic equations,
Yeah.
many of the scientists looking at that began to theorize that they wouldn't be surprised if they didn't find that gravity was an artifact of the electromagnetic force, and that possibly the electromagnetic force is the one force to rule them all. Right now, in mainstream physics, we talk about the strong nuclear force, which holds an atom together,
Right.
the weak nuclear force, where radiation comes out of an element, with the electromagnetic force and gravity, and they define them as four different things. And I
Right.
think Einstein made one critical error in his thought experiments, and that was the assumption that space is empty and the only force in the
Right.
universe is gravity. Had they included and understood that plasma itself can
Mm.
come in three different modes, there's the
Uh,
dark mode where you don't see it,
Right. Right.
but it's still separated charge. And that's what space is filled with.
right.
Yeah.
Then there's the glow mode, which we're familiar with things like a neon light. That's
Sure.
plasma in the glow mode. And then there's the arc mode, where if you have, an electrical cutting
Yeah. Plasma
thing,
torch. Yeah.
plasma torch, you can create plasma in the arc mode, which is why you have to wear that welder's mask to prevent damage to your eyes.
I know.
Mm.
And those forms are all present in nature as well. And if our science hadn't gone down this path with general relativity of defining everything as interactions
Yes.
of gravity, we wouldn't end up with all the weird things that we've got with, the
Mm.
Big Bang, the inflationary period where they allow everything to accelerate past the speed of light, and
Right.
then oh well, galaxies aren't rotating just right to satisfy Newton's gravitational law. Therefore, we have to have extra gravity, so they invent dark matter, and then they say,
Right.
well, everything's moving away at this ever increasing speed, so we have to have dark energy.
And
So we have all these dark things and black holes and stuff. It's just become kind of nonsensical. I would love to see science finally come out of the dark ages.
dark. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, I think you're not alone. I think we agree. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this fantastic talk.
Well, you're very welcome. I hope we
Thanks,
did
Simon.
good.
Yeah, no, you did
did good.
absolutely brilliantly. And your examples and your knowledge and your practicality shines through. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank
Right.
you.
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much, Dan and Barry. Really, that was very interesting. You both touched on a lot of very good subjects that we're all very fascinated to hear about. I honor your service and your knowledge that you have gleaned over your lifetime. It's because of you that I can say the truth is out there. Because what I mean when I say that is that it's people with years of knowledge who are prepared to share what they know that actually reveals what's going on.